Welcome, Anna. Welcome to Transitions Unscripted, which are conversations I have with friends all about life's unexpected twists and turns. Now, this is going to sound really strange, but it is so lovely to see your face. And I say that because I was working out the other day, we probably haven't seen each other for about 20 years, if not a little bit more.
I think we've known each other for nearly 25.
Is that
But
how long? Oh, that's
yeah,
how
it
long.
would be. And it's but we haven't seen each other for maybe, yeah, I want to say kind of between 15 and 20 when I was back in London. Yeah.
Exactly that. And the reason being, yes, you have worked and you're now living abroad, and I very much stayed in the UK. And I think we did see each other when we were living in London and would go out and have kind of drinking sessions. And I always remember it being sunny in London as well. I remember sitting in the park and drinking. But since then, life has just taken completely different paths for us. So it is so lovely to see you. It
Yes, so,
really is.
so nice and so unexpected to be sitting here talking to you about this.
I know, exactly. Well, we've stayed in touch, which is so lovely. And you got in touch with me, I want to say about a year ago to 18 months, when you ran to tell me about your young onset Parkinson's disease. Was it that long ago?
Um, it was actually 2 years ago.
Years ago. So you ran to tell me, and that's what we're going to be talking about today.
That's so funny. I don't remember that.
Well, it's amazing how quickly time goes. So yeah, we're going to be talking about your young onset Parkinson's, and I think trying to open up the conversation a little bit, talking about chronic illness in general.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw the question out there to you first. What is a young onset Parkinson's, and what were your symptoms, and how long was it for it to be diagnosed?
So young onset Parkinson's is Parkinson's disease diagnosed in those people under the age of 50. So obviously it's normally a disease you'd associate with people in their 70s or 80s. Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurological disorder, and it's caused by the degeneration of dopamine producing neurons in the brain. So dopamine, as we know, is this chemical messenger responsible for regulating mood and movement and other bodily functions. And so as your levels decrease, a variety of motor and non-motor symptoms appear. So it is quite rare. When I say rare, in the sense that to have it so young, so young onset Parkinson's accounts for about 5 or 10% of all cases. So it's relatively rare, but it's not unheard of, let's say. I
And
think
so, yeah, sorry. So when you were diagnosed with it, then did it take long for it to be diagnosed, or were they trying to attribute your conditions and your symptoms to other illnesses?
no, I mean I think my path to diagnosis was relatively straightforward. It wasn't long and drawn out. My first symptoms were definitely easy to dismiss at the time. So I had perhaps in the run up to being diagnosed, maybe a couple of years when I actually look back, stiffness in my body, tremor in my hand, but every little symptom, I never really connected them together, and I never really went into detail, analysed to a great extent, because they were all things that I sort of just brushed off. You chalk up to stress, or you chalk up to sleeping in a bad position, or drinking too much coffee, and also you're young, so you don't immediately think, "Oh, there's something wrong with me." Over time, I started to notice more things that just didn't seem right, like I was having trouble writing. And I thought, oh no, it's because my hand's cold, or like there was always you could always rationalize the symptom, but it got to a point where there were just too many things all at once, and I had to I had to sort of seek medical advice. I was never in denial. I'm not the sort of person to bury my head in the sand and think, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I swiftly sought medical advice. And the other thing was, I think I was lucky, because I think when you hear about people's paths to diagnosis of whether it's a chronic illness or something else, often it can take a long time to discover what's wrong. I think as well, you always think, oh, I'm too young, or my body's going to bounce back, but I decided it was important to go and find out. I initially went to see 2 or 3 neurologists in Mexico City, where I live. In fact, it was my husband who said, "You need to go and see a neurologist." And I was like, "Why do I need to go and see a neurologist? What's this all about?" But he was determined that that's what I had. Like, there was definitely something wrong with me, and I needed to go and see a neurologist. So I was like, "Okay, fine." So I went and picked any neurologist, because I thought, well, it doesn't matter, because they're going to tell me there's nothing wrong with me. And I unluckily picked a neurologist with like a terrible bedside manner. Had a pretty terrible experience at the beginning. But
In sorry, can I stop you there? In what way was he rude? Was he blunt, dismissive? What was he like?
it was because Parkinson's is diagnosed in different ways. But if anyone who's gone through any kind of neurological study will know that there are certain tests. There's like the finger tap, and you're also walk down the corridor, and they observe you, and they can say straight away, this is what's wrong, because there are certain like hallmark sort of postural indications, or the way that, for example, when I walk, my arm doesn't swing. My right arm doesn't swing when I walk, and I hadn't noticed, but it doesn't swing at all. And it was just,
And he picked up on that when you walked into the room.
yeah, basically straight away. So it was a woman actually. She knew straight away.
Sorry.
But the way in which she delivered the information was, don't worry, you've got Parkinson's disease. It's not that common, but you can have brain surgery. And then she started showing me pictures of older people of, of symptoms and how it's going to progress. And I was just like, it was New Year's Eve. And it was just like the worst time to be imagining like having this kind of diagnosis, but not somebody who had any kind of empathy.
Oh my
She was just I got the impression she was just very delighted to have like found the diagnosis, and she felt really pleased with herself that she diagnosed me. But so I came away from thinking, okay, fine, this is what she thinks I have. I think at that point, by the time you go and seek medical advice for something, you kind of know you've done enough research in your own, like you go on Google and you say like, here are my symptoms. And I knew deep down when she told me it was a shock, but I'd already sort of diagnosed myself at that point.
Oh, interesting. So, okay, I just want to stop there because I was going to ask what were those initial few weeks and possibly months like, knowing that this is what you had? Did you had an inkling already, as you said? So was it a shock?
Yeah, I think it was still a shock, because basically what that was that I took myself off to the Mayo Clinic in Arizona because I just wanted a different opinion, and I wanted, it was also helpful to go and to have the analysis done in English and speak to a different neurologist, and I just felt more confident doing that. So that's what I did. I spent 2 separate weeks in Arizona, and I went through thorough evaluations, and I received a clear, very black and white diagnosis, which was they do a DAT scan, which is how they diagnose Parkinson's. It's a radioactive substance they put in your brain, and they can see an image of your brain, and they can compare the left to the right, and I could physically see that the left side of my brain looks different to the right. So it was needed at that point. I needed that kind of clarity. So obviously the first sort of experience I had with the neurologist wasn't ideal, but it wasn't long and drawn out. It wasn't a kind of period of not knowing what I had, wondering, because in these situations we often tend to think the worst, and we start to imagine all these worst case scenarios. So it was quite good that I wasn't waiting. It wasn't months and months or years and years of not knowing what was wrong with me, which I think is quite common, particularly when something is diagnosed in someone so young, which is not kind of very common.
Absolutely. And so, although it's not life threatening, it's a lifelong condition that you now have. And so there are going to be, going forward, there are parts of your life that are going to be very, very different. So you're going through this huge transition over many, many years. So could we talk about your lifestyle now? Have you had to implement new diets, new exercise, meditation, therapy? What is recommended for someone with a chronic illness?
So going back a few years, I mean, I was in good physical health. I just turned 40. I was happily married, young family. And life felt great. Life felt probably a little bit more linear, but extremely happy. And if you'd asked me back then, I would have probably struggled to tell you anything that I would have changed about my life. So I was building a business. I was about to launch another one. I still am renovating a hacienda to build a hotel, like all these projects. Life was at full speed, and navigating life with the confidence that my body would always support me, and that's something we take for granted. But otherwise, I was like physically, mentally, and emotionally, pretty balanced, healthy, active, but not paying like an excessive amount of attention to diet and exercise. So obviously for me, I think the biggest change has been physically, and to struggle with certain limitations. Parkinson's has chosen to start on the right side of my body. Now it's something
It can start anywhere, can it, though, depending on the patient? Okay.
it starts on one side of the body and it generally passes to the other. So that's how it generally progresses, although you have no indication of time scale or anything like that. So some days my movements are relatively fluid and natural, and other days they're stiff and deliberate. So doing very normal things like feels like an uphill struggle. So, for example, now I really struggle to write and or type, and most of my friends who know me well will are very understanding of me sending long voice notes and instead of text messages and things like that. But yeah, otherwise, I have tremors, muscle weakness, like poor dexterity and fine motor skills. I move very slowly, like my right hand side moves slower than my left, so I feel like I'm sort of out of balance all the time. My kids find it very funny that like my right doesn't move quick. Like I can't gesticulate with my right hand. I can't reach out for things with my right hand. My left has taken over, and it's remarkable that I was very right-handed before, but now I do everything with my left. And although it's not my strong hand, technically, I'm learning to adapt a bit and use it more.
Would physio help? What do they recommend in terms of exercise that you can do?
So yeah, obviously, diet and exercise are really important. So there are key factors, lifestyle factors that can really help. So I do physiotherapy regularly. Obviously, the things that really matter are things like diet and good sleep. So diet's hugely important. I still love to eat meat, but I've definitely shifted to more of a plant-based diet, emphasizing more anti-inflammatory neuroprotective foods. I never ate a lot of processed foods in the first place. I cook a lot. I made a lot of things from scratch. It was always part of who we are as a family. So that hasn't been really a difficult adjustment. And I still prioritize the Mediterranean diet, which has long been linked to Parkinson's and its benefits. Obviously, nutrient-rich food, healthy fats, high fiber, fresh produce. To be honest, a good diet for anybody, but particularly somebody suffering from a condition like Parkinson's. And it's convenient because my husband is from the south of France and is an excellent cook. He's an outstanding chef. So it's helped to keep me on track, to be honest.
Absolutely. I maybe should have asked this a little bit earlier, but has there been a reason why you developed Parkinson's or young onset Parkinson's?
I think it's a good question. It's long been something I've pondered. Is it genetic? Is it environmental? Is it like a combination of two factors? Because obviously Parkinson's wasn't something I really associated with. I didn't have any kind of predisposition to it. So when I first was told, I was like, why? There is obviously a why. You kind of wonder, why has it chosen me? I feel like, I don't know, like I think it's something you turn over in your mind, but you realize that the why matters less than the what now. I think life very rarely gives us neat explanations. Reality, and the environmental factors could play a part, but I couldn't really pinpoint one thing that might explain it.
And I can imagine you could go round and round in circles, Anna, can't you? Trying to, like you say, pinpoint something, and maybe there isn't that just one thing. It's just the way our cards have been drawn, isn't it?
Exactly. And I don't think I ever sat there earlier and thought, why me? It wasn't really the way that I processed the situation. I think I'm quite pragmatic. My approach wasn't to wallow in self-pity. Maybe I did it a little bit at the beginning. I'm sure I probably did.
I think you're allowed that, definitely.
Allowed to do that. But I was very determined to move forward and to find practical solutions, not solutions necessarily, but practical ways to move forward. And I think for me, it was about having as much information as possible. I talked obviously about it to many people, and I think that allowed me to pass through these kind of natural, logical stages, because it's a grief in a sense. It's a grief of you're grieving the person you thought was permanent. You're grieving what you thought your life would be, and you have to go through that process of grief to look forward to your future rather than to sort of mourn your past, but more importantly, try and live like more anchored in the present. But in terms of the genetic factors, it reminded me because my grandfather on my father's side, who wasn't my biological grandfather, he basically had Parkinson's in his 80s and lived into his 90s. And I often find myself thinking it would be great if he was still around and I could talk to him about it. Because, I was a young adult at the time, and I had very little. I perhaps didn't fully appreciate the nuances of the condition back then. He was an old man, and he shuffled a bit when he walked, and that's all I saw. But he, when I look back, I realised that he did face it with determination and patience and a lot of humour. And
What a lovely thing, though, because I was going to ask about your support network actually, in terms of who have you turned to? Because as you've mentioned, you're in Mexico City. Your husband's family, I think they're in France, is that right? And your family are in the UK. So where do you go to have that support, whether it's the emotional support or the mental support, in order to kind of keep on going one day to the next?
I think that, I think I'm very fortunate, although I am far from family. I'm very well surrounded, and I think what's helped me a lot in this process is having the ability to be open about it and to talk about it, to communicate. And so being, as I mentioned before, just being able to talk about it a lot during the kind of first 2 years enabled me to go through you have to go through the phase of experiencing frustration and anger and all those things. And you need to talk about it and let it out. And then 2 years later, I'm in a much better place. But I think that, for anybody suffering from a chronic illness, there is a lot of support available. And I think each person needs different amounts of support in different ways. My kids have been an amazing support to me, even though they're only little. My stepchildren as well, who are a bit older. But my kids have dealt with it in, a very compassionate way.
Do they understand, Anna, what's going on? Because I was going to ask about your family, because they are young. And how have you shared your journey so far with them? Are you being very honest with your situation?
Yeah, very honest.
Okay.
I mean, they were young at the time, and some people would prefer to keep that from their kids, but I
Hmm.
just didn't see the need to keep it from them completely, because I realized quickly that they'd been very curious, very compassionate, and probably far more adaptable than I expected. I think my
Yeah.
little boy, who's 5, he's probably struggled with it more inside, because I think he's found he's presented a few behavioural issues, which are probably par for the course for his age anyway. But unraveling it's probably a power struggle caused by his own 5-year-old perception of my weakness or my perceived weakness or limitations. Uh, and he's working through it, and so am I. And I think that it's something that I do see the value of, yes, being honest, um, and showing him my vulnerability. But I think it's also really important to protect them as well from the worry that thinking that something terribly is wrong with me, that like he needs to understand that it's all going to be fine. My daughter's a little bit older, she's 7, and she's very tuned into my condition. She's always anticipating my needs, offering help where it's without being asked.
Oh.
She's very sweet. She's been a very steady steady stream of support for me, and showing really maturity beyond her years. And I think as a family, like, we've just had to adapt a little bit. My husband's been an incredible support as well. He's very optimistic. He's
Yeah.
taking time to understand what I'm going through, but yeah, he's just always there to encourage me, even on the bad days.
Well, absolutely. I can imagine that there must be days when you might not have the energy, or you might have the frustration or the fear, but being a parent never stops, does it? So does it create a lovely kind of reality check, having these little people around you, that actually you have to keep on going, you have to keep on with the routine, whether it's the school or the homework or whatever it is, and it makes you almost get up in the morning and think about them, opposed to anything that your body's telling you that particular day? Or am I being naive? Can you
I
not ignore the condition to some
mean,
degree?
you wake up every morning with it kind of, you don't forget for a second what you're kind of living. But I think the context of young onset Parkinson's is quite particular, because, yeah, you're grappling with questions that most people don't ask themselves until 30 years down the line, until much later. So you're basically in the middle of trying to manage a career, raise a family, chase your own personal goals or ambitions, and you're faced with that at once. So in a way, I see both sides. It's obviously challenging, but it's also, you're more perhaps physically energetic than you would be. You're not contending with other health battles in parallel
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
were, versus if you were kind of in your 70s or 80s. So yeah, it's not easy, and I think but it's a renegotiation with your relationship with time, and ambition, and the body that you thought you knew. It's all about adaptability. Having the kids is a great distraction, because you can sit there and think, this is terrible, this is the worst thing that could possibly have happened to me, which obviously it's not, because there are far worse things that could have happened to me. But you also have to stop and look around constantly of like what you have, which is like a great life. Like, I've got nothing else to worry about. If I can be completely honest, I have a wonderful life, and this is a little obstacle that I'm going to have to continue to adapt to. But I've seen, I've taken the view that it's a challenge rather than a curse.
I think that's most amazing mindset, Anna. And I think many people will be listening, being like, wow, if they were presented with what you've been going through the past 2 or 3 years, they might have a very different outlook. So I think what you're sharing now is phenomenal. And it's a real inspiration to know, like you say, it's a challenge, and life is full of challenges.
Yeah,
And it's how you can work around those and with other people to get through them.
exactly. And I think, you have to consider that your fate can always be a lot worse. Like, Parkinson's isn't going to end my life. It will manifest as a multitude of challenges. But I think
Hmm.
this allowed me to embrace this concept of vulnerability. I think when you have a condition or a limitation that gives you a sense of physical vulnerability, which it definitely does. I feel vulnerable physically because I don't react in the same way to things. I'm not as quick as I used to be. I don't have the same physical abilities.
Is
But
that
you're
Sorry, is that frustrating? Does that irritate you because you're not what you were
really
before?
frustrating. It's really frustrating, and it's usually the little things that frustrate you. Like, obviously writing is just annoying because I used to love to write. If I want to kind of express myself, you know, by word, it's like it's dictation, and it's so clunky and so awkward, and it's so annoying. But little things really get me, like not being able to write my kids a birthday card when it comes around. Birthdays come around every year. It's like I just want to
Mm.
write like a few words. All I can manage is like my name and a scribble.
Yeah,
Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, you can't waste your time being sentimental about silly things, which is not silly, but something that in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter. They're more interested in spending time with me being a good parent in other ways. But yeah, little things get you.
of course, of
But I
course.
think the topic of vulnerability, when you feel vulnerable physically, you're forced to enter into the idea of this concept of emotional vulnerability. And I think on the surface, vulnerability for most people is about uncertainty and risk and emotional exposure. And you do realize that it's not about weakness, but it's more about courage.
Yeah.
As humans, we protect ourselves from being vulnerable because we're afraid. So it's about being courageous. And I think it's about accepting being imperfect, being compassionate with yourself. The resilience is really important. That's the path that I will continue to tread.
I think
Um,
that's a brilliant message. And actually, sorry again to interrupt. I was listening to a podcast the other day. I don't know whether you know the comedian Miranda Hart, but she's just recently come forward, been talking about her experiences. I think it was Emmy, and she talked about vulnerability. And she
yeah,
says it's not a weakness. It's just we need to get in touch with our vulnerable sides in order to move forward. Because if we don't get in touch with that vulnerability, you're fighting against a brick wall day in
yeah,
day out, which is exhausting.
yeah, exactly.
So you've said you've got a great community around you of your family and people, and you mentioned some of the challenges. This might be a question that you can't answer, but is there a one standout challenge with having young onset Parkinson's?
Um, there are a few. I think of the most. I think one of the biggest challenges, I think the thing is about a chronic illness generally, it's something that's invisible to others. So it's also this kind of internal battle. For the time being, Parkinson's, let's say, I don't think it's invisible to others, but most people would say they wouldn't notice I have it. But like, I
Yeah.
don't feel that way necessarily, because obviously it does present itself as physical symptoms, and I am physically like, I feel I move differently, whatever. But people say they don't notice it about me. But I think then one of the biggest challenges is just feeling uncomfortable all the time. Like, imagine the most comfortable position you can imagine yourself in, like in front of the television watching your
Mm.
favorite show, like on the sofa or in your most comfortable bed. Wherever I am, I'm not comfortable. Like, I'm constantly moving, trying to be comfortable, and I just never find this level of comfort, and that's quite exhausting. So this feeling comfortable, that's one thing. Um, Perhaps like like just this feeling of, if I were, I don't know why, but for maybe it's like, I think my husband's always telling me that I worry too much, which I probably do. But for example, in like a crisis, I feel like I wouldn't be able to respond quickly to help somebody else. And maybe,
Physically.
yeah, like in a fight or flight moment, like I go to,
Okay.
because my body just doesn't react in the way that it used to. And it might be also because we live in like an earthquake zone, and it was just like 2 nights ago at 2 a.m, like I heard the earthquake alarm, and it was like, just like, I think it makes anyone panic, but it just the fact that I just don't feel as capable as before of protecting my kids, or reacting quickly enough to something. So that's something that I often think about. But I think the main challenge for me is just this unpredictability. I can do all the things right on one day and feel good, and then do all the things again and not, and for no apparent reason just feel rubbish. And I think that's really hard because it just frustrates, this unpredictability. But it is also an invitation to let go of rigid plans and embrace flexibility and say, well, it doesn't matter. Like, you can't put so many expectations on yourself. There'll always be difficult days.
Exactly that, and that is part of being human as well, isn't it? In the fact that one day we could be doing everything exactly the same, but it could turn out very differently. I'm obviously not taking on board, having a diagnosis, but you're right in saying we need to let go
Yeah.
sometimes to that control.
Yeah. And stay positive by, you know, having a laugh or focusing on what you can control. And I
So
think
that's on that question. What do you do to relax and enjoy yourself? And if someone is listening to this and they're wanting a bit of advice and they're going through similar kind of symptoms to you, and they've got the pain and the frustration, what do you do to switch off, if you can switch off?
um, that's a good question, because yeah, there will always be difficult days. Like yesterday for
Yeah.
me was just a difficult day, and I couldn't really explain why. I think I was just tired. I have a very busy life, and actually, it's a constant balance of being busy but not being too busy, because stress obviously affects enormously the symptoms. So trying to be busy, I have my own business, and I think with work, I've learned to pace myself and prioritize, and not have to prove my worth through sheer productivity. But I'm very fortunate because I have a great team and I have a lot of support around me, so I can pace myself and do things at my own pace. So work has been in a way like a lifeline for me, because my business is thriving. I'm busy. I have a real structure to my week. And exercise has become, I guess it's been really transformative for me. It was like, it wasn't that I didn't exercise at all before, but I didn't place so much emphasis on it. So I've been doing a lot of yoga, and yoga is something I've discovered in a big way in the past year and a half. I'd done a bit in the past, but now it's part of my life. It's like 3 or 4 times a week. So
Fantastic.
for my body, my physical kind of rigidity, so it helps with flexibility, strength, balance, all those things. But it really provides this kind of much needed sense of calm when anyone who has
Hmm.
young children will feel the same. Like, I think it's just really helped. It's just really helped me, and I really miss it when I don't do it. So yoga is really important for me. It's also a confidence, trying to make my body as capable as it can be in the future to protect me, because that's what I feel I'll need. So it's like talking about this sort of toolkit of things that give you the feeling that you are doing as much as
Hmm.
possible to
Hmm.
maintain your body as strong as it can be to face whatever comes next. So, but I feel over the past years, I've managed to get a really good balance of um, all the other things all the lifestyle factors, getting those things in order. Um, and for the time being, I'm not taking any medication. So
Okay, and is that your choice, or is that actually what you discussed with your professional healthcare team?
Well, it's been quite a personal decision because I think, the medications that exist for Parkinson's are medications that mask the symptoms. It's an incurable illness as of now. So they mask the symptoms, they don't slow the progression. So choosing to live medication free is a very personal decision, and I think probably a decision that some people can't understand because they're thinking, why on earth wouldn't you try and make your life easier? But I think I've just come to realize that for now, it's rooted in this desire to truly sort of engage with the condition. It's going to be something that's with me forever, regardless of whether I master the symptoms. So it's this, it's a curiosity, I guess, I have about this sort of the adaptation. We live in this culture that's focused or prioritizes a lot, like the suppression of discomfort. So I find quite a lot of value in exploring what happens when you don't immediately silence the symptoms. And for
And
now,
is that almost testing your strength? Is it how far you can push yourself?
it's kind of like, yeah, it's wanting to kind of feel the condition and understand and
Hmm.
coexist with it in a way.
Yeah.
I think I've also considered the trajectory of the disease. It's a progressive condition. It's going to
Hmm.
probably is going to get worse. I say probably because I don't know for sure, but it's a progressive condition. The
So
symptoms,
have they told you how that's going to look over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
they don't really know. And I think that when I say they don't really know, that all you can do is look to other people as examples. But it's not a one size fits all kind of
Hmm.
condition. There are so many symptoms that people experience. There are the common ones like the slowness of movement, the rigidity, the tremors. I have, for example, also brain fog, memory loss. I actually thought for a long time it was because I had baby brain, and then I realized my son was 5 years old. I was like, it can't be baby brain. It's not particularly. It's not that severe at this point. The other thing is I operate in 3 languages. We're a multilingual family. We speak English, English, French, and Spanish. I can't even say it. And so I spend my day switching between languages. And I used to
Which is
think,
exhausting in itself.
I thought maybe it's that. But then I realized I was trying to construct a sentence in any language, and I couldn't find the piece of vocabulary I was looking at. I couldn't think of the word in any of the 3 languages. Like, there's something not right. So there are some people are affected more kind of cognitively, but cognitive decline, it tends to happen when you're a lot older. Like, it's pretty mild in my case. But I have sort of issues with my senses, interference with my hearing, my vision, my sense of smell. I mean, the list is endless. I kind of experience a new symptom, or I think, well, I'm ready for the next one. Like, you have to be kind of quite agile and quite adaptable. So with regard to medication, there are certain medications that can help those symptoms, but it is a progressive condition, and medication can be effective, but can also have diminishing returns over time or present other side effects. So for the time being, I feel like I'm prioritizing non-pharmacological methods, whether it be sleep, exercise, yoga, meditation, alternative methods, supplements, different protocols.
It's such a personal decision as well, and I think you have to be very strong in that, because there will be people that turn around to you, Anna, and saying, "What? Why?" They will clearly help you, and I say that in a very loose term. But you have to be strong in yourself, I think, and I applaud you for that. I think saying that you want to be more in tune with your body and knowing what stage it is going through and how that stage will change month from month or year from year, I think that is an incredible insight in terms of how you're looking at
Yeah,
your condition and where it's going to take you.
exactly. And I think that I see a long future ahead of me with this. It's like,
Mm.
that's the other thing. I want to explore all the possibilities before I turn to medication.
Exactly.
It's not about rejecting it, or it's not about a stance against science. It's more about pacing myself and giving myself time to adjust to the illness, exploring how I live with it. And that's just simply where I am with it now. And I've explored a lot of alternative things. I take, as I mentioned, about diet, but I've explored microdosing, jumping in ice baths. I'm about to start red light
Definitely
therapy.
braver than me. Oh my gosh.
Things, one by one, because at the beginning you're very tempted to do everything at once, and then you
Yes.
which of these is actually helping me. So pacing myself trying things, really finding what works for me. And, supplements, I take a lot of supplements. I won't list everything I take every day, but supplements that, prioritize brain health, gut health, cell repair, and, try and live as healthily as possible. As far as diet's concerned, I know that, there are people that say that they've cured their Parkinson's or they've completely eliminated their symptoms by being on a ketogenic diet or eliminating certain food groups from their diet. I haven't got to that point yet. I haven't gone down the road of elimination diets, but I wouldn't say no to it if I felt that it was a tool that I could turn to and it could give me the help I needed.
There's just a couple more questions, and it was going to be just to open it up from young onset Parkinson's to talking about chronic illness in general. What advice would you give?
I think it is an interesting one. Living with a chronic illness is not just a physical challenge. It's really about this mental and emotional journey. And I think you have to allow yourself, like I have to a point, although I'm at the very much the beginning of the journey, you have to allow yourself to pass through these phases. It's normal at the beginning to feel very frustrated and very angry and question why it's happening to you and all those things. And you need to allow yourself to feel that frustration, and you need to allow yourself to feel overwhelmed at times. But not let these feelings define you, and focusing on what you can do rather than what you can't, asking for help where you need it. And what I've said in my case, and each chronic illness is different, but constructing this sort of toolkit that works for you. Find the things in your life that bring you joy, focus on the things that you can do to give yourself space and time, pace yourself, listen to what resonates with you. But it is difficult because there's a lot of information out there, and I think where possible, avoid Googling everything, because you'll
It's hard.
Google everything at the beginning and you'll always see the worst case scenario. You'll always imagine the worst of the worst. So take your time and find what works for you. And also, depending on where you live, there are resources out there, depending on how you wish to approach it. Some people want to be part of a support group or talk to other people. But I personally have found value in being able to share what I'm experiencing. I feel a different person to what I felt 2 years ago. I feel very supported. I feel very much in control of it. And to a point, I think I've really accepted what's happening to me. I think the challenge with something like Parkinson's is because it is progressive, like many chronic illnesses. Like, I don't know what's around the corner. I don't know how it's going to progress, but I feel kind of cautious optimism for the future.
Amazing.
It's important to have the tools to navigate whatever comes your way,
Exactly, and going back to what you said, that takes time, doesn't it? And that takes experience and to some degree some kind of experimentation, whether that's through diet or exercise or support groups, whatever it might be. You have to put yourself out there to know what you enjoy and what you need, isn't it?
You can't predict what the future holds, but you can certainly try and approach it with an open mind.
And what about, sorry, and so what about if we switch it over to those people who know someone with a chronic illness? Are there things that you've experienced with, whether it's your husband or friends or even support groups that you might have gone to, do's and don'ts? How can people support someone they know who could be suffering?
I think for either party involved, whether it's the person, the patient or the carer, if you put it in those terms, or the immediate family or whatever, it requires this balance of empathy and communication, because it's not easy for either party. I think the immediate family members, or those helping to offer support for someone experiencing illness, I think it's really helpful to be really informed about the condition. I found that, really useful when people I know, whether it be my immediate family or my friends, like have a knowledge about it, have taken the time to understand. That means a lot. So being informed about the condition, being able to communicate openly, and also just listening, because sometimes it's more about the practical help or just being there. When you have something that's incurable, it's not actually that helpful to always have for someone else to be trying to fix it all the time, because actually some things can't be fixed.
Exactly.
And actually what's better is just having the general support rather than always being in search of a solution. But I think on the other side, there are, the needs of the other person are not to be overlooked either. It's actually extremely tough, very stressful bearing the burden of somebody else's condition, because you're bearing the burden of all those things. As I mentioned, the unpredictability of never knowing whether that person is going to feel good one day or to the next. So I think it's really about working as a team, about mutual respect and, communicating.
Yes, that's fantastic, and you're so right. It's although it is the patient going through this day to day, you have to be aware of the people around you as well.
It's been a real eye opener for me. I was always somebody who loved to do things very quickly. And the tables have turned for me because I found myself, for example, I'll be in a shop and I'll be trying to pay for something. And the person there will be saying, right, that's however much it is. And it'll take me an infinite amount of time to find the money in my purse because I can't do it with my right hand. So I'll just be like scrabbling around with my left hand, trying to put my card in, but just like super awkward, like super slow. And I'll feel this wave, maybe it's in my mind, but I don't think it is, like this kind of impatience of people behind me thinking like, what's this person doing? Like, why is she so slow? Why is she taking so much time? And I feel like probably I was that person. I was that person who, drove on the road and thought, why is this person driving so slowly? Like, and it's really been a lesson for me in patience and understanding that you don't know what someone else is going through. It's like a huge cliche, but you don't know what kind of a day someone else is having. You don't know why the person in front of you is taking 10 minutes to take money out of their wallet.
Like you say, because it's not a physical at the minute. Well, to me, it's not a physical disability. I will look at you and I wouldn't know you were any different. And so it's very easy to judge someone, isn't it, when there isn't that physical sign.
So it's been that kind of that lesson for me in patience and realizing that, what difference does 30 seconds to your day? Because actually,
Yeah.
generosity or kindness to somebody else, typically you would do it with somebody older because you think, oh, that person is going to naturally be slower, but actually you have no idea of what kind of situation anybody's in if they're suffering from an invisible chronic illness. And just showing kind of patience costs nothing. And so that's been a lesson to me because, I was that impatient person before, I think.
I think I am that impatient person, and what you've just said to me now will make me realize and much more aware that you are so right. We don't know what's going on with the next person.
I think I'm going as quick as I can, and as quick as I can, enough for the person who's waiting behind me to pay for what they're buying.
Exactly.
That's been a lesson. That's been a real lesson for me. I think for anybody listening to this, going through any kind of transition regarding health and particularly a chronic illness that they're going to have to adapt to and learn to live with, it's really, you have to give yourself time. And I look back now and think I'm in a totally different place to where I was 2 years ago. And all those things have helped me. And I see it as this, in a weird way, like an adventure. I feel like it's brought many things to my life, and it will continue to bring many things to my life, along with frustrations, perhaps some negative things, but a lot of positives as well. And
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing, Anna. I want to finish up with my last question, if that's okay. And that is, if you could go back to your younger self and tell them that in their early 40s they would develop young onset Parkinson's, what would you say to them?
Goodness, well, I think even when I hear that question, I feel shocked. It still shocks me.
Because of the age, or because of the condition?
It's huge. It's a condition you associate so much with older people, and particularly because I had my own personal experience of experiencing it with my grandfather. So I'd still be shocked. It still shocks me to hear it. I'd probably tell her, the young Anna, that, your life's going to take a turn you didn't expect. But don't worry, it's not the end. It's going to be a transformation for you. You're going to learn to slow down for a start, which I probably needed to do. You're going to learn to observe, to appreciate small things, to adapt. And most importantly, like you're going to construct this identity around it rather than letting it define you. And that will take time, and there will be uncertainty, but you're going to be fine. And you're going to be
Oh my gosh. I think that's amazing. I love that. And I think that's all stuff that we can take on board without a doubt. It has been such a joy talking to you. And I can't believe that you're all the way over in Mexico City and I'm here in Yorkshire. And I really hope it's not another 15 years before I see you in person, because that would just be too sad to think about.
I saw you last week. It's really crazy, but yeah,
It's
funny.
mad. It's mad, isn't it? But thank you so much for sharing your journey of these last 2 years. And your positivity is incredible and it's contagious.
It's about an attitude that you have
Yeah.
and about, how you move forward. And obviously there are days when I don't always apply all those rules, but that's the way I'm trying to live. And at the moment it's working for me. And it's the moment I feel positive for the future. And that's all I feel I can do.
I will speak to you very soon. And thank you so much and take care.
Take care. Bye.